What's up everyone? This is Dexion the Gamer, and I'm back today with another drop. Today we're testing Neverness to Everness. This is a free-to-play game with a gacha system that's not overly oppressive in limiting your progress, and it's kind of an anime-style Grand Theft Auto. The combat system is pretty cool as well. So, without further ado, let's get into it by first going over our settings. So the game is an Unreal Engine 5 game, and that already makes me feel a bit skeptical. You have graphics presets ranging from performance to cinematic. Between the extreme and the cinematic presets, I really wasn't able to tell a difference. But there is a performance gain to be had in some situations. The game features Lumen for its use of global illumination and reflections, which can either be turned off or turned up to hardware ray tracing. Then on top of that, there is a full ray tracing mode, aka path tracing. We start our testing with using DLAA at 4K, using preset K from DLSS 4.0. Oh, by the way, the game ships with DLSS 4.5's preset M once you activate performance upscaling. So we start off with high 60s to 70 frames per second, which to me is a decent sign. You can get an even higher base frame rate if you turn off Lumen GI and reflections. 1% lows are nice and tight in the 60s. Input latency is hovering around in the 70s, which is not so great. That's because this game basically uses reflex only when frame generation is active. So it's basically kidnapped and cannot be accessed as a separate option. And I gotta be honest, I don't like that trend. Black Myth Wukong basically did the same thing. It makes it so you actually cannot get the snappiest input feel without activating frame gen.
The wind's just right.
So now we're using DLSS Quality, as you can see from this shot here. Frame rates jump up from 60s and 70s to 90s, and even topping out somewhere at the 100 frames per second mark. If there's one thing I can say about most UE5 games, is that once you enable DLSS Quality, the performance nearly doubles every time. For an experience that's basically neck and neck with native, you can't go wrong here. And now we're going to apply DLSS Balanced to see where the performance can reach. And by the way, you can only render a max of 120 frames per second in this title, but you can use frame gen to hit higher frame rates to fill out those big and juicy 240 plus hertz monitors. With DLSS Balanced, we get pretty close to 120 frames per second, and image quality basically looks the same as DLSS Quality. If you notice here, as I look up into the sky, the frame rate can lock at 120 frames per second. And I want you guys to look at how drastically the latency reduced. Before, it was in the 40 millisecond range, and it dropped almost by half to the 20 millisecond range. That's because when you use an in-game frame rate limiter, you're able to get the absolute best latency possible. Even low frame rates, such as even 30 frames per second caps, can have good latency. So now we switch up to DLSS Performance, and the game will automatically switch to preset M here. I think at this point the game starts to get CPU bound, because besides slightly lower latency, we don't really improve the frame rates much. And then the other disadvantage is you'll start to see more noise in reflections. Alright, now for the moment of truth. When I turn on hardware ray tracing, how much is my performance going to suffer? But before we check that out, I really want to thank the devs here because they allow you to switch back and forth between Super Resolution and Ray Reconstruction's Upscaler, even if you select Path Tracing. As we all know, Ray Reconstruction can be a real resource hog, so it's great that we have the option to use Unreal Engine's denoiser instead, which is leagues better than Capcom's, for example. Okay, so far so good, I think. We're still holding a steady 60 plus frames per second using DLAA with preset K, and we're still able to hit the 70s. That's actually great because when you use hardware ray tracing, the first thing you'll notice is the reflections are much higher quality, and they're no longer screen spaced. You'll be able to see everything in reflections. But oddly, sometimes you'll see things that aren't actually there, like some buildings sometimes. For the really crisp reflections, that's where path tracing comes in. But I'm not totally convinced path tracing is the way to go here. Okay, so now we're going to use DLSS Quality, still using preset K here. We're still able to get into the 90 frames per second range here, which is good. Doesn't seem like it can touch 100 frames per second anymore, but I guess that's just the cost to pay for hardware RT. Reflections still look good, and I wasn't able to notice any boiling artifacts. Latency is in the 50s, which is better. Now's a good time to test frame gen, and frame rates go past 120 frames per second into the 140s, touching 150. It feels very smooth. Latency dropped down into the 30 millisecond range, where before it was in the 40s. This is what I meant earlier. It's obvious that reflex is held hostage by frame gen in this title. Well, anyways, besides that gripe, it's a pretty good experience. No weird ghosting or user interface problems. And no boiling artifacts here on this slightly reflective surface. Kudos to the Unreal Engine denoiser in action here. Now we're going to test Ray Reconstruction, and just FYI, the game defaults to Ray Reconstruction's preset E, which I honestly prefer over preset D since it's sharper and cleans up the noise better. But you can really see how heavy it hits performance versus Super Resolution's preset K. Frame rates drop down into the 40s here. Latency gets way worse hovering over the 100 millisecond range. This just makes the game feel way too heavy. This is not a recommended playstyle at all. But those reflections are crispy. It takes the quality upscaling setting with Ray Reconstructions to get back into the 70s and 80 frames per second range. Image quality still looks great, and this would be a good base for frame gen. Selecting the performance mode here will push you into the 90 frames per second range, just shy of 100, which is where we were when we used Super Resolution on the quality mode. You can see just how heavy Ray Reconstruction really is here. The good news is you still won't see boiling on slightly reflective surfaces like you would in Super Resolution's preset M on performance mode. But the drawback is you will start to see a little bit of smearing in reflections. Alright, now it's time for the ball buster, full ray tracing, aka path tracing. And we're going to start with Ray Reconstruction off here. So typically the RTX 5090 very predictably gets between 30 to 40 frames per second once you turn on path tracing using DLAA. And this game seems to follow that trend. However, you will get some hits above the 40 frames per second range here, which is pretty impressive. I just can't with that latency though. 130 milliseconds feels like the old days of playing Quake 3 on my mom's dial-up. You can tell there's more accurate indirect lighting and shadows, and also the reflections are extra crispy. Oof. I don't know what it is in this area, but it will rob you of 70% of your performance. Jesus Christ.
Welcome to 24. Easy shop, easy go.
Okay, switching on Ray Reconstruction will take just a bit more of a hit to performance, but since we're already at native 4K, it's not really noticeable. The latency at 150 milliseconds is criminal though.
Welcome to 24. Easy shop, easy go.
Okay, switching on DLSS Quality. Without Ray Reconstruction will net you around 55 to 60 frames per second here. I would consider that pretty good. I know of some titles where you still can't hit 60 once path tracing is turned on using DLSS Quality.
Woohoo!
Now, using DLSS Quality with 2x frame gen gets you back into the 90 and 100 frames per second range. Also, latency is much more playable at 40 to 50 milliseconds. With 4x frame gen, you start to see that robust high FPS experience again. Latency is still behaved, staying below 60 milliseconds. Now we kick on ray reconstruction using the quality mode just to check the frame rate difference. With Super Resolution's preset K, we were getting roughly the same frame rate, so that's pretty interesting. Path tracing takes up so many resources out of your GPU that the overhead from the tensor cores crunching the ray reconstruction algorithm pretty much goes away. Using Ray Reconstruction's balanced preset, however, doesn't seem to add much performance, still struggling to get back up into the 70s. But more frames per second is more frames per second. Image quality remains as good as the quality mode. Last but not least, the performance mode gets you a 70 to 80 frames per second base, which would be great for frame gen. Actually, even balanced would have been good, but performance is even better for shaving down the latency, as long as you don't mind the smearing and reflections too much. And with that all said, I hope you all got some value out of this content. Please throw me a like and a sub, and I'll see you on the next one.